Female detective arrested after murder for hire plot.
Because I did not do this.
A female NYPD detective made it to the news after she was caught planning to kill her husband. A New York Police Department officer, Valerie Cincinnati, had been charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Cincinnati paid her boyfriend $7,000 to hire a hitman to murder her estranged husband and the boyfriend's teenage daughter. Her boyfriend, however, turned out to be cooperating with authorities, and the entire conversation was captured on audio and video. Prior to the planning, Cincinnati had a lot of trouble going on with her husband, as both she and her husband had restraining orders against each other. Not only her estranged husband, Cincinnati also had a volatile history with her boyfriend as well. Prosecutors argued in a detention memo filed in court that all evidence pointed to the fact that Cincinnati wanted to hurt her husband, though it is kept secret why she wanted to kill her boyfriend's daughter. Cincinnati first approached her boyfriend about having her estranged husband murdered in February 2019 and continued discussions with him in person and on the phone, all of which were being recorded. Her boyfriend told her he knew someone who would commit the murder for $7,000, which he would convert into gold coins to pay off the hitman. Cincinnati didn't think twice and withdrew the $7,000 in cash from a Long Island bank in the same month. Her boyfriend then used the money to purchase 5 ounces of gold coins. The murders were supposed to take place in May 2019, officials said in court records. Her estranged husband, Isaiah Carvalho Jr., was to be murdered near his office on Long Island. Cincinnati was recorded saying on the tape that the killing would not look suspicious because the murder would take place in the hood or the ghetto to avoid suspicions. At one point, according to court records, Cincinnati seemed to become anxious about why the boyfriend's teenage daughter had not yet been killed. After the boyfriend informed her that the hitman would not commit the murder near the child's school, Cincinnati is alleged to have asked him, "Okay, so she leaves school. You said he knows exactly where she lives, right? So what's the problem?" At another point, she told the boyfriend to tell the hitman to run her over. The boyfriend was wearing a recording device, and the entire conversation was recorded on audio and video. That's when investigators from the FBI and the NYPD started taking things seriously. They played Cincinnati's game to capture her red-handed. One morning, Suffolk County Police arrived at Cincinnati's home to notify her that her estranged husband had been murdered, but it was all part of an FBI trap to arrest the murder's conspirator. Almost immediately after the detective left the home, Cincinnati began discussing her alibi and what she would tell the police if she were to be questioned about the death. Then at 10:48 a.m., an FBI agent posing as the hitman texted a picture of the husband, appearing to be dead in his car, to the boyfriend. Along with the picture, the agent texted a demand for another $3,000 in order to carry out the murder of the boyfriend's minor daughter, identified in court papers as Jane Doe. After she showed concern to her boyfriend, saying that delete the message to clear all evidence, the FBI moved in and arrested Cincinnati. The defendant was captured on audio and video recording planning the murder, and once she was advised that the murder of her husband was affected, she was captured on audio and video planning her alibi and destroying evidence of her involvement in the crime, the lead prosecutor said. Soon after Cincinnati's arrest, her estranged husband was informed about his murder plot, who was shocked at knowing and immediately sued her for divorce. But despite such overwhelming evidence against her, Cincinnati kept denying the charges and said that she was innocent. Perhaps she was hoping for some kind of miracle. Cincinnati's case shook the core of the NYPD, as she was believed to be one of the most respected and senior detectives in the department. Being a 12-year veteran, she even helped the department to arrest a bank robber, which made her famous throughout New York City. However, her real face had been revealed. When presented in court, Cincinnati pleaded not guilty to the felony charges, but was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison. Undercover cops arrested by other undercover cops. A comedy movie-like scene unfolded in real life when police officers tried to arrest each other. It all happened in Detroit, when a massive drug raid mistake led to cops arresting each other. Undercover cops from the 12th precinct posed as drug dealers to catch a pair of sellers. Meanwhile, another undercover police group from the 11th precinct thought they were real drug dealers and tried to arrest them. That's when things went downhill pretty fast. Neither 12 nor 11 knew that the other group was undercover, so they began to rampage the place when they arrived and quickly began to yell at each other, which led to fighting like hooligans. The homeowner, who was the primary suspect in the 12th precinct cops' operation, just stood there and watched them basically just rip each other apart without knowing who they were. Following this embarrassing moment, an internal investigation had been launched by the Detroit Police Department, given the huge mistake and the danger involved in the situation. The Detroit police chief realized that the confrontation between two groups of cops could have resulted in a much uglier outcome, as more than 24 Detroit police officers were present that evening. After the fight, 2 of those officers were treated at the hospital for their injuries. one for a contusion to his eye socket and one for a split lip. While several of the officers were placed on restricted duty and one supervisor was removed from the Special Operations Team. Now you might be thinking, how did they not know that they were all cops? Well, it turns out that there wasn't any communication going on in the department, which could have avoided this confrontation. The 11th Precinct officers didn't know that the cops from the 12th Precinct were involved in a drug operation, so they followed them thinking that they were following real drug dealers. The incident highlighted the lack of communication going on throughout the department. Had any of the cops drawn guns, the outcome would have been quite different. If looked at from an objective point of view, this was a terrible and embarrassing mistake made by the very people who were thought to show professionalism and due care in their day-to-day operations. Not only embarrassing, but it was also a very dangerous situation in which lives could have been lost. The Detroit police chief also admitted the total failure of his department, saying that he didn't expect that. This incident should serve as a wake-up call to all police departments. It's a story that will be talked about for a while, and it will be included in the Detroit Police Department training section as, let's try not to get each other killed. Number 3, NYPD detective arrested after disability fraud scheme. In 2014, the New York City law enforcement authorities were shocked after a fraudulent scheme of more than $400 million was uncovered. As it was, along with many other police and FBI officers, Michael Bonanno, a 44-year-old detective, was receiving a significant amount of money from Social Security Administration, SSA, as disability benefits, all while he was working as an undercover police officer with the New York Police Department. Bonanno had submitted false claims to SSA, saying that he was unable to work due to injuries sustained in the line of duty. But the authorities discovered that Bonanno had been employed by the NYPD as a detective. He had been collecting money from the SSA for almost a decade and had received hundreds of thousands of dollars. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. After Bonanno's fraud was discovered, a wide investigation was initiated into the SSA's operations. To the authorities' shock, more than 100 retired and on-duty NYPD officers were receiving funds by submitting wrong statements. A former NYPD cop named Louis Hurtado was also receiving thousands of dollars from the SSA as disability funds while being a 6th-degree black belt and starring in instructional videos. Hurtado told the NYPD that he was disabled with neck injuries and psychological problems. Expressing his disgust over the fraud, New York City Police Commissioner Bill Bratton said, "A disturbing fact about the case was that the fraud was going on since 1998 and that more than half of the people receiving the benefits had registered themselves as victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks when, in fact, they weren't." Bonanno and Hurtado, along with other corrupt cops, were charged and sentenced to years in prison. Not only prison, but all the cops involved in the corruption were also ordered to pay restitution to the SSA. While all the guilty officers were arrested, the New York residents are still questioning authorities about whom to trust. The $400 million that cost taxpayers could have been used for the betterment of society and the people who were rightly deserving of the Social Security benefits, not someone who was deceiving the government and getting thousands of dollars in salary. If you want to continue exposing corrupt cops, please subscribe to the channel.